Hi guys, my name is Christine and I'm a dating, relationship and personal development coach, and today I'm talking about why your ex is still silent even when they love you. Okay, so if you have a suspicion that your ex still loves you but they're still silent, they're still not contacting you, perhaps you've been doing no contact for a while, why would then an ex who does actually still love you still be silent, right? And the answer to that simply is that they're just not ready yet, right? If you know, or you have a strong belief that your ex still loves you, then the reason why they haven't reached out yet and the reason why they're still silent is because they're just not emotionally ready yet, right? So what do I mean by this? So what this means is that they haven't processed things perhaps in the way that they've wanted to yet. Perhaps they're still unsure about you, right? There's not really much you can do on that point, but it might be something that they're feeling. They might be unsure about that. They might think that you're over it, right? And that might be a reason why they're not going to reach out, because they feel like you've moved on or something like that. So that might be why they're still silent, right? If that's the case, then perhaps you want to kind of like, I don't know how your ex would, seize this information about you, but if they think that you've moved on, then it might be a good idea to kind of show subtly that you haven't moved on. And I don't mean writing sad posts or anything like that and saying things like, oh, I miss my ex, things. No, I don't mean that. I just mean making sure that you have like the right information public, right? So for example, if you can keep your relationship status public, like saying that you're single, right? That might be something that would be, beneficial to them. But again, you don't know. That might not be the reason why they're not reaching out to you, but they could think that you've moved on with your life. So you want to make sure that that information is available to them if they want to look you up. And of course, if you're comfortable with that information being out there like that. Because it might be the case that you are actually over it. And if that's the case, then you don't have to do that kind of thing, and you can maybe even block your ex if you're not interested in getting them back and you have moved on with your life. There's no reason why you should really keep your ex's information available to you like that, or keeping their pages open to you if you're not really that interested in getting them back, right? So, and that's a lot of conclusion that a lot of people come to, because sometimes the best thing to do is to never get back with your ex, especially if there was a lot of arguments, if there was a lot of deviousness going on, and basically if it just wasn't good. Because a lot of the time, a lot of people have nostalgia for their ex because they look back on the good things. And that's usually what happens when someone gets dumped. They start looking back with the relationship with nostalgia, right? Because they're looking back at the relationship with nostalgia and they're only looking at the good things, they're then desiring to get back with that person instead of looking at like maybe the last week to the last month of the breakup, when actually maybe even the person that got dumped may have actually been thinking, oh yeah, you know what, I kind of miss my old life. I kind of wish we weren't together anymore, and that kind of thing. And perhaps there was a lot of arguments, a lot of tears, and it just wasn't great. Perhaps it was turned into a bit of a toxic environment at the end, which it can do when, these kind of things are about to, couples are about to break up. So, it's a good idea to actually look back at those times as just as much as the good times. In fact, maybe it's a better thing to do to actually just look at the bad things. Because if you guys get back together, what's really interesting is like when two people split up and they get back together, they're only usually back together for a little while before they realize that nothing has changed, right? And then they split up again for good, right? And that time may be, when they get back together, that time could be a couple of months or it could be a couple of years, right? But if they've broken up before, it's very, very likely that it's going to happen again, because basically either person hasn't changed. Now, obviously, people can change, but you might not be dealing with someone who is actually willing to change, or perhaps you're not someone who is willing to change who they are, right? But that might be, that's probably not true, considering you're watching, a video on self-help about this kind of stuff. So you probably are willing to change who you are, to grow, to become better, which is great. Really admirable quality to have. But a lot of people aren't like that. A lot of people aren't like you, right? And it's very unlikely that your ex is going to change, because if there are some things that you didn't like your ex doing, Perhaps you didn't like the way that they communicated with you. Perhaps you didn't like their passive aggressive behavior, or maybe they had a few toxic traits that you weren't really that happy with, right? Then if that's the case, then it's very likely they're still going to be the same person when you get back with them. But perhaps what's happened to you recently is that you're looking back at the relationship with nostalgia. You're only looking and focusing at the good things, right? And that is a bad way to go, basically, if you want... If you're thinking about getting back with your ex, if you're only looking at the good things, then your judgment is clouded. Okay? The only time that I've said, and I still believe this, that it's a good idea to get back with an ex, is that if the breakup happened because of a huge misunderstanding, like, for example, they thought that you cheated on them, right, when that actually didn't happen at all, or there was a third party involved, like a friend got in between you, started spreading lies about you, and that's what made them dump you, made your ex dump you, because they believed that you were someone that you weren't, because there was someone actually in between you trying to sabotage things. So that's another reason why it's okay to get back with an ex if something like that has happened. But of course, you need to get rid of that middle person who blotched things, and have to say to your ex, like, I don't want you being friends with them anymore if we're going to get back together, because they spoiled things, or we need to not be friends with that person if it was a mutual friend, right? So you need to be very careful with that kind of thing. You need to have some conditions if your ex is going to come back into your life, of what needs to change and things like that. Because a lot of people don't. A lot of people just get back together. They don't think about it too much. They're, like I said, they're too busy looking back at the relationship with nostalgia, and they just fail to do these things. And then another breakup happens down the road when either person finds someone better, or basically another massive argument happens, and perhaps the same thing happens again where you just break up because of those kinds of circumstances. So, if your ex is still silent though, they need to get to a place, and they still love you, basically. If they still love you and they haven't reached out yet, they need to get to a place where they're ready. And unfortunately, that's out of your control. You can't make them more ready, right? The best thing you can do is give them time by going into no contact, by not smothering them, basically, giving them this time and space to heal and to think about it. But ultimately, if your ex still loves you and they haven't reached out yet, it just means that they just haven't got to that place inside them where they feel like they're ready, right? And like I said, you can't control when you're going to when your ex is going to be ready, right? The only thing you can do is stay in no contact and give them the space, right? But ultimately, there's not really much you can do. But if you do know that your ex loves you, that's kind of good, because at least now you know it's only a matter of time before they come back, right? If you really do believe and know that they still love you, then it's only going to take, maybe just a couple more weeks, a few more days, maybe a few more months before they're actually ready to reach out to you and start talking to you again. But ultimately, there's really no way of knowing. I mean, you may, it may be the case that you do know for sure that your ex still loves you, which is great. They'll be coming back very soon if that's the case. But unfortunately, if you're still unsure about that and unsure if they still love you, then it's a good idea not to wait by the phone if you're unsure, right? It's a good idea to make sure that you're moving on with your life, because ultimately you just don't know, right? If you don't know that they still love you, or you're unsure that they still love you, then, there's still a chance there that you're never going to hear from them, because if they don't love you anymore, there's not really a lot you can do. But if they do love you, then they will come back eventually. They will reach out. Now, I sometimes get a lot of people saying to me things like, yeah, well, my ex loves me, but they're stubborn. Right? They're not going to reach out to me. I know I'm going to have to be the one that reaches out to them because they're too stubborn. If that's the case, you don't want that person in your life. You don't want to be in a relationship with someone who is stubborn like that. Because all that means is that even when they're wrong, you're the one that's always going to have to pick up the pieces. And trust me, that is an exhausting job, and it's not a healthy job to have. You shouldn't be picking up the pieces of your partner. You should have a partner in crime. You should have someone who is willing to work with you, willing to work things out, right, and be able to communicate their feelings with you. If they can't do that, then it's not your job to fix them, and you need to let that person go. But ultimately, like I said, if your ex still loves you and they haven't reached out yet, it's just because they're not ready. You just need to give it more time. So thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to get in touch with me personally and you'd like coaching with me, then please go to www.christineloveridge.com. I shall talk to you again very soon. Bye.